Hello everyone. In this time, we will sum up some literary criticisms that we have learned for this semester. The first is traditional criticism. Traditional criticism is a literary criticism to interpret literary works by focusing on the extra text materials. Those extra text materials are including the biography of the author, the background life of the author, and all information related to the work and its author. After well gaining its popularity, traditional criticism tends to be too extreme because of strongly focusing on everything behind the text and also its author. This literary theory forgets the text itself. That is why there comes a new literary theory called New Criticism. New Criticism claims that focusing on the extra materials of a literary work is not useful. This literary theory says that a literary text as a work of art should be interpreted by focusing on the text itself. New criticism has strong relation to the close reading, which is the careful analysis of a text by way of paying full attention to its structure, words, symbol, and so on. This literary theory is concerned on the text without paying attention to the added information about the author. It is in order to provide verbal or textual evidence, and its approach is considered objective criticism. After a long time, this literary theory was accused of being too restrictive by denying the historical and biographical information and too linguistic. Then it was replaced with other literary theories such as reader response.
Reader response criticism. In reader response criticism, readers are considered as the active participants who create the work of literature in the process of reading it. Thus, the meaning of the text exists somewhere between the words on the page and the reader's mind, even though the interpretation each readers has will probably be similar, yet has slight difference. It is because this theory allows the readers to take the reader's personal feeling and perspective to analyze the literary work. Therefore, it can be used to understand ourselves better, and subjectivity is portrayed in this theory. Reader response has many branches along with its scholars, and those are Jonathan Collar and the structuralist approach, Stanley Fish and rhetorical approach, E.D. Hirsch Jr. and the ethical hermeneutics approach, David Blake and subjective criticism, Norman Holland and the psychoanalytic approach, and Wolfgang Iser and the phenomenology of reception. Feminist criticism. In the 20th century, feminist criticism appears because of the exclusion of women writers and women's role from the traditional literary canon and the central application of the patriarchy system in the society. What is literary canon? Literary canon or canon literature is a term where a particular literary work or other creative works is recognized as standard or authoritative. Canon literature at that time was dominated by men, and that issue triggered women to make an action towards the absence of the woman itself in the literary canon. And what is patriarchal system? Patriarchal system is an ideology that privileges masculine ways of thinking or point of view and marginalizes women politically, economically, and psychologically. The feminists believe that patriarchal society operates to the advantage of men and serves men's interest above all others, and this idea oppresses women. And feminist goal. First, to uncover and develop a female tradition of writing. Second, is to interpret symbolism of women's writing, so it will not be ignored by a male point of view. Third, is to rediscover old texts. Fourth, is to analyze women writers and their writings in a female perspective. Moreover, is to oppose sexism in literature and to increase awareness of sexual politics of language and style. Feminism is divided into three waves. First wave happened on 19th century and early 20th century in the United Kingdom and the United States. Second, in the early 1960s and lasting through the late 1980s. And lastly, third wave feminism began in the early 1990s. The famous feminism scholars are Voltaire de Cleyre, Margaret Sanger, and Florence Nightingale.
Psychoanalysis. Psychoanalytic theory is a theory which is influenced by the tradition of psychoanalysis begun by Sigmund Freud. The center of this theory is unconscious, which is a source of sexual problems in everyday life. Freud had introduced his structural model, which divided into three agencies. They are id, ego, and superego. First, it is completely unconscious part of the psyche that serves as a storehouse of our desires, wishes, and fears. The id houses the libido, the source of psychosexual energy. Second, ego is mostly the partially conscious part of the psyche that processes experiences and operates as a mediator between the id and superego. Third, superego is often thought of as one's conscience. The superego operates like an internal censor or encouraging moral judgment in light of social pressures. In the 1920s, Freud's theory of the unconscious was very significant for art and literature. His theory used to interpret or to construct the auto-psychological conflicts in a work. Many artists sublimate their desires and translate the imagination of their wishes into a work. Thus, a work is the author's dreams, a manifestation of author's desires and wishes that couldn't realize in reality. Another outstanding figure of this theory are Carl Gustav Jung and Jacques Lacan. Based on Carl Gustav Jung's theory of collective unconscious, which is a collection of common thoughts and experiences that all cultures share. Jung believes that literature is an expression of the central themes of the collective unconscious, and critics often use his work in discussions of literary models. On the other hand, based on Lacan's thought that the unconscious and our perception of ourselves is shaped in the symbolic order of language rather than in the imaginary order of thoughts.
Postcolonialism emerged in 19th century. It is broadly a study of the effects of colonialism on cultures and societies. It is concerned with both how European nations conquered and controlled third world cultures and how this group have since responded to and resisted those encroachments. Postcolonialism, as both a body of theory and a study of political and cultural change, has gone and continues to go through three broad stages. The first stage is an initial awareness of the social, psychological, and cultural inferiority enforced by being in a colonized state. Second, the struggle for ethnic, cultural, and political autonomy. Third, a growing awareness of cultural overlap and hybridity. As a literary theory or critical approach, it deals with literature produced in countries that once were colonies of theories found among the texts and subtexts of other countries, especially of the European colonial powers such as Britain, France, and Spain. In some contexts, it includes countries still in colonial agreement. It also deals with literature written in colonial countries and by their citizens that has colonized people as its subject matter. One of the concepts in postcolonialism is Orientalism. Orientalism is introduced by Edward Said in 1995. It is a perspective that suggests the East and the Orient are representation of both fear and fascination. In postcolonialism, there is diaspora identity. Diaspora identity is the result of forced or voluntary migration. People experience a sense of belonging to a culture which is other to the dominant culture of the country of residence. There are some key terms that we should know in studying postcolonialism theory. First is alterity. Second is diaspora. Third, imperialism. And then Eurocentrism, hybridity. Major features in postcolonialism theory are Edward Said, Homi Bhabha, Frantz Fanon, Gayatri Spivak, Chinua Achebe, Wole Soyinka, Salman Rushdie, Jamaica Kincaid, and Buchi Emekta. Marxist literary theory is a form of critique or discourse for interrogating all societies and their texts in terms of certain specific issues, including race, class, and the attitudes shared within a given culture. It is introduced by Karl Heinrich Marx at 1818 until 1883. Its other major figure is Friedrich Engels. Marxist literary theory focused on the representation of class distinction and class conflict in literature. It focused more on social and political elements than artistic and visual elements of a text. Marxist critics examine the outer social class, its effect upon the outer society. It also examining the history and the culture of the times as reflected in the text, and investigate how the author either correctly or incorrectly pictures this historical period.